as John reported, Mitt Romney jumped at the chance to say he can do better than the president. Take a listen to Romney.
The reason the rate came down was because about 340,000 people dropped out of the workforce. So many became discouraged they stopped looking for work. This is a time when America wants to have someone who knows what it takes to create jobs and get people working again. I think it helps to have had a job, to create a job, and I have, and I will.
All right, me, I don't see how Obama can get reelected 186 days from now. 2% growth in GDP, 115,000 jobs, a shrinking workforce, $6 trillion of debt. Somebody's got to explain to me how exactly he's going to do this. So we have Democratic pollster and strategist Bernard Whitman. We bring in Terry Jeffries, CNS News editor-in-chief, and CNBC contributor Jimmy Pethokoukis of the American Enterprise Institute. Bernard, I go to you first. Pathetic job number today, lousy job number last month, lousy GDP number, people dropping out of the workforce left and right, and on top of all that, you got $5 or $6 trillion of new debt for programs of spending that have done the American economy absolutely no good. Bernard, I do not see how President Obama, with polls in the mid-40s, can possibly win.
Well, Larry, no surprise you're wrong once again, and let me explain why. The fact is the job numbers aren't where they need to be yet, but the economy is fundamentally sound and growing, and let me explain the reasons for that. First of all, we've had 26 straight months of job growth compared to almost 4.5 million jobs lost under President Bush. For an economy to really grow and prosper and for jobs to be created, you need three things. You need confidence in the financial markets, and today's sell-off notwithstanding, the Dow and the S&P had their best quarter in 14 years last quarter. Nasdaq best in 20 years, number one. Number two, consumers. Consumers 8 months ago, two-thirds of them nearly thought the economy was still in a downturn. Today, two-thirds of them think the economy has stabilized or is on its way to recovery. Third information point that's key, small businesses. Small businesses have not been this confident and this optimistic about their future expectations.
Bernard,
in 4 years,
some amazing
according to the Wells Fargo and Gallup poll,
no filibuster, Bernard. No filibuster, Bernard. Otherwise, we will take your mic down. You know you can't do that on this show. Factually, the small business household employment fell 169,000. Last month, it fell also 31,000. Jimmy P., it's one of many indicators going the wrong way, and I want to bring in something that Mitt Romney said on the campaign trail today, and that is, after 3.5 years, are you really better off? It is still the economy, Romney says, and people aren't stupid. What's your take on this?
They're not stupid. You ask people how they feel about the... Listen, if all you knew was looking at those consumer confidence numbers, those numbers are still at the levels that you see during a recession. And no wonder why. Not only are we still in the longest streak of 8% plus unemployment since the Great Depression, incomes have gone nowhere for 2 years. And listen, I know the unemployment rate has fallen. That's only because this government is disappearing workers faster than an old-fashioned South American dictatorship. They're just disappearing these people. They're not counting them anymore. So you have very little job growth. You have no income growth. Listen, if the rest of the year is going to be like April and March, you're right. Mitt Romney's going to win.
That's the point. Jimmy P., just real quickly. What does it mean that the workforce is disappearing? The participation rate is way down. The employment worker population is way down. As John Harwood accurately reported, even in today's report, civilian labor force dropped 342,000. Last week, it dropped 164,000. And the so-called broader unemployment rate, which is the underemployment rate, is still 14.5%. Are those facts related? People withdrawn from the labor force, so the real unemployment rate continues around 15%. Is that what's going on here?
Listen, once you've been out of work for a long enough time, they just quit counting you. They figure you just don't have an interest in going back to work, so they don't quit counting you. That 8.1% number, listen, it's really more like 10 if you do a little if you smooth out those labor force participation rates. And really, the real number, because when you count underemployment, as you said, that's 14.5%. If this president wants to go in re-election saying, listen, 14.5% unemployment, Good enough. I'm working on it. Well, we'll see.
Terry Jeffrey, look, I acknowledge the Democratic National Committee White House talking points that nearly 4 million new jobs have been created by Team Obama. I mean, at least under their aegis. But you know, Terry, at a similar point in the Ronald Reagan recovery, there were over 9 million jobs that had been created. And per month, Terry Jeffrey, Reagan was experiencing 400,000 increases, not 115,000. Now, Terry, I want to know, do you think that Mitt Romney can make this case stick? That's the key point. Can he persuade people that he's the guy with specific items to make this case stick?
Absolutely, I think he can make it stick, Larry, because I think people see it in their real everyday lives. You know, you made the point that the economy was growing strongly when Ronald Reagan was running for re-election back in 1984. This afternoon, I went and looked at the historical statistics for unemployment when presidents were running for re-election in the post-war era. We have not had a president seek re-election with an unemployment above 8% since World War II. In 1984, when Ronald Reagan sought re-election, unemployment was at 7.7%. In April of '84. That's pretty high. But the GDP grew at 8% in the first quarter of 1984. As you said, we have 2.2% economic growth. That's not going to drive unemployment down. Unless we have a serious spurt in economic growth between now and the election, I think this guy's going to have real trouble getting reelected.
See, Bernard, the big point here is whether Obama's policies have failed dismally. The big spending policy, the Obama policy, the threats to tax the rich policy, the EPA policy to crucify oil and gas. In other words, he's going to have to be accountable not only for the slumping numbers. He had a couple of good months. That's it. The numbers are going the wrong way. But the policies behind the numbers, and in particular, all this debt that Americans have been saddled with from all that spending got us what, Bernard? One of the worst economic recoveries in post-war history.
You know, Larry, if you want to shake your finger at someone, I'll tell you who to shake your finger at. You on the right always complain government doesn't create jobs, private enterprise does. Well, let's take a look at private enterprise. Record profits, hoarding cash. Why aren't private corporations in the United States investing in America and creating jobs with the cash that they're sitting on their balance sheet?
Because they're terrified of all the tax increases on their way. They're terrified of Obamacare. They're terrified of the spending and the debt. Thank you for asking the right question, because they're terrified of where economic policy is going under this president.
No, because they're hoarding cash. They're hoarding cash, and they fail to invest in America. If you want to be angry with someone, talk to the corporations. Get them to invest.
Don't you see that answer? Why? Why? Because economics doesn't happen on stock exchanges. Economics doesn't happen at markets. Economics happens between your ears.
Economics
your perception of
your
risk.
mind.
And the perception of risk by the private sector is they are worried to death where policy is heading.
Go ahead, Terry Jeffrey.
There's a very good and very clear measure of the effectiveness of President Obama's policies. January 2009, his top economic advisor, Christina Romer, published a report. Anybody can go look at it. She said if Congress enacted the $787 billion stimulus Obama wanted, unemployment would never exceed 8%. The next month, it ticked up to 8.3. Congress passed the bill. We haven't had a single month in Obama's presidency when unemployment has been below 8%. That stimulus was a total disaster. Every penny was borrowed from the Chinese and the Japanese. Our great-grandkids are going to be paying interest on that.
Gentlemen, I got to leave it there. Bernard Whitman, thank you. Terry Jeffrey, Jimmy Pethokoukis. All I'll say is today's numbers, another lousy month of job creation, opens the door wider for Mitt Romney to become the next president.